NHL offseason coverage is in full swing. On the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we're kicking off our breakdown of every single team in the NHL, all of their top fantasy pieces that you're going to need. Today, starting with the Dallas Stars. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're already looking ahead to the upcoming fantasy hockey draft season, and that's why you're tapped right into your daily source for fantasy hockey news. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Friday edition. We're taking a look at the Dallas Stars as the first team in our countdown of every single squad in the NHL. Steele and I are going to break it down team by team, all the fantasy studs that you need from each squad. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Steele, we're doing a rapid fire episode on today's show, keeping it tight. Dallas Stars, though, you know I was very high on this club. They knocked on the doorstep. So much to like about this squad. Some of these players might seem obvious, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about them anyway, because if you can catch a few of these pieces, you're probably in good shape headed into next season. What are you thinking about for this Dallas Stars squad?
Yeah, this is a very talented young team. You know, Jim Nill did a fantastic job drafting these prospects, developing them into superstar players for this organization. This is a very strong team, and unfortunately for them, they lost to the Edmonton Oilers, who moved on to the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost to them in the Western Conference Finals. So they've gotten close every single year over the last couple of seasons. It's been tough for them, not being able to get to the finals. But look, this is still a very promising team right now. And so we're going to dive into the top 5 fantasy assets, fantasy hockey players, the best fantasy players of the Dallas Stars going into next season. So I think for the most part, these names are going to be pretty obvious to them. It's about drafting who and what order and where they might fall into. But I think you and I can both agree at number 1, it has to be Jason Robertson with the best fantasy value on the Dallas Stars roster right now. He's such a talented player. Even with the down season, he led them with 80 points, 29 goals, 51 points in 82 games. A plus 19, tons of shots on net. He's a power play specialist. He knows how to move the puck well. He's a great 5-on-5 as well. So I think you and I can both agree that Jason Robertson will be the first player off the Dallas Stars fantasy rise. Maybe besides Jake Ottinger, if someone decides to take a goaltender first. But other than that, it has to be Jason Robertson, in my opinion.
I think those two names right there are the two most valuable. When I look at this Dallas Stars club, though, Steele, and we can talk about these guys in a minute, it's actually some of the younger pieces that I foresee really coming on strong. They're not going to fall into the top 5, but the Thomas Harleys of the world, not to get off track and onto the names that I really like, Thomas Harley and some of these young pieces, Stankoven, I got my eyes on them too. But to go back to the list, Jason Robertson, 29 goals, 51 assists. Last season, he does a little bit of everything well on the offensive end. He's a dynamic player. The down season has me somewhat concerned, but in terms of that elite level 80-plus point production, I'm not that concerned because the Dallas Stars are so good around him. And then I'd go Jake Ottinger too. Even though he started slow last year, he finished strong, 905 save percentage, 272 goals against, 35-14 and 4. There were concerns about Jake Ottinger at the start of last fantasy season. Me, as a Jake Ottinger owner as well, concerns. But he came on strong, and he is definitely one of the best young goaltenders in the league. But, Steele, why don't we talk a little bit about that blue line, in which I don't even know if I asked you about what you thought about the moves that Jim Nill made. I love Jim Nill, but I'm a little bit concerned. I'm throwing that term out a lot about Lyubushkin and Matt Dumba. But what's your take on those two signings? By the way, Lyubushkin, 3-year deal, an AAV of 3.25. How do you feel about all those takes?
Yeah, it's definitely a different looking blue line for the Dallas Stars from what they had last year. They bring in Ilya Lyubushkin, they bring in Brendan Smith, they bring in Matt Dumba, who has the potential of being a sneaky defensive ad for this Dallas Stars team. A guy who's on the smaller side, but is not afraid to bring the physicality and will not back down from anybody. So Matt Dumba is someone that has the potential of doing having some greatness with the Dallas Stars, even though he is on that third D pairing. Obviously, Thomas Harley and Miro Heiskanen are the top two guys there. Essen Lindell chips away offensively at times too. So the defenseman that they went on got, I mean, Ilya Lyubushkin for what was it, 3.75, 3.5 million AAV,
3.25,
3.25 AAV over for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I like the contract overall because he brings the boom, he brings the physicality, he knows what he's doing in the back end. So I'm fine with those defensive, the defensive signings from Jim Nill. Obviously you lose Chris Tanev, you lose a couple of other bodies on the blue line, so you got to fill those positions. But it's really Thomas Harley and Miro Heiskanen. Obviously, Miro Heiskanen is going to be another top 5 target from the Dallas Stars roster. I actually have Miro Heiskanen at number 5 on my list of where I put him best fantasy value-wise for the Dallas Stars. And I know you mentioned Jake Andre at number 2, and I'm not going to disagree. He probably should be at number 2. I need to throw this your way, though, because it's very interesting to me, because I think Wyatt Johnston has the biggest potential this season to have the biggest and best surprising fantasy value asset for a GM out there who drafts him. I love this player so much. I know you love this player so much, so I need to hear what your opinion is on Wyatt Johnston going into this next season.
Let's talk about it right after the break. We're getting you in and out short and sweet today, baby. We got a lot of things on the go, but we're keeping the fantasy fire coming. Make sure you're tapped into the channel. Subscribe, 5-star review. You know the drill. We're going to break down every single team in the NHL all summer long right here so you know what's going on. Fantasy draft season, baby. It's upcoming. eBay Motors season, it's in full swing. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge W's. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Also, make sure you go check out and subscribe to the Locked On Sports Day YouTube channel. You can also find them on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. They cover everything sport in the sports world, top news, opinions, analysis, everything you need in the sports world on Locked On Sports Today. So make sure you go subscribe to that channel. Continuing, though, the conversation of the Dallas Stars' top 5 best fantasy value targets for this upcoming season. We both agree Jason Robertson is at number 1. Jake Onger will be probably the second Dallas Star off the board, if not the first. So we agree there with Jake Onger. Wyatt Johnston, though, continuing the conversation with him. This is a special player at such a young age. Only 20 years old. He just had a 65-point season in a full 82 games.
Oh, he's 21 now, Steele. Who are you? You're slipping on the birthdays.
Slipping on the birthdays. He just turned May 14th. May 4th. 21 years old, Wyatt Johnston. 2 seasons in the NHL. Rookie's year, 41 points in 82 games. Next season, 65 points in 82 games. Has yet to miss a regular season game. He's been absolutely elite in the playoffs as well. And just looking at the peripherals, looking at the statistics, now a 30-plus goal scorer, 60-plus points, a plus 14, 26 points on even strength. If he can get some more power play time, what does that mean for his fantasy value as well? Up from 160 shots to 216 with 52 hits and 42 blocks. You and I both love this player so much, and the young prospects that are on this Dallas Stars organization. Maybe we talk about Logan Stankoven later in this episode. But Wyatt Johnston, for me, He's right there at number 2 or number 3 coming off the board on the Dallas Stars organization for fantasy draft.
You know how I feel about this player. Thomas
I
Harley,
know.
Wyatt Johnston. I've been talking about these two guys probably far too much, but at least this is one of those ones that I can feel good about being on these players early. I want to mention this. Number one, his draft selection when he was drafted out of the Windsor Spitfires, 23rd overall. There's a couple of teams here with egg on their face. Winnipeg, Chaz Lucius, Nashville, Fedor Shekov at 19, Fabian Lysell by the Boston Bruins, a bunch of other guys I've never heard of, and Wyatt Johnson, a steal at 23. Whoa. Why wasn't this kid taken higher, Steele? He had 124 points in his final year in the OHL. And then he comes into the NHL and he basically looks like he's been playing at this level for 2 decades. That's probably what I like the most about his game. He's actually not the greatest skater out there, but what he makes up for in his lack of overall skating ability, and he's not a poor skater, but he's not exactly the McDavids of the world either, is his ability to get in the gritty areas, and he just has a nose for the net. His puck sense, he knows where to go, and that's what goal scorers do. And I think you are so right at this one. Third off the board for sure. He is going to be this year's Steele. You're going to hear it from me a lot. I know you're already on it. He is going to be one of those players, though, that is definitely going to see a overreach in certain leagues. And I just hope that it pans out because of what you said off the jump. He is still 21 years old, and slumps can happen for players that young.
Yeah, and the thing I love about him so much is the stick handling ability, the quick release of his shot. You never know exactly
Sneaky
where
good
he's going to be shooting the puck. Sneaky good shot. He loves picking the corner, short side when he comes down that right wing, the right side of the board. So for me, I think again we're in total agreement right now. Jason Robertson 1, probably Jake Onger number 2 because he's such a hot commodity. Goalies are one of the hot commodities in fantasy leagues, and then Wyatt Johnson at such a young age. For me, I said Miro Heiskanen at number 5, so that leaves Rupe Hintz at number 4 for me. And I know you were talking about the worrisome of Jason Robertson's, regression last season, going from what was it, 100 plus points to 80 points in the National Hockey. Yeah, 109 points to 80 points compared to 2022-23 to the 2023-24 season. But for me, what speaks more volume is the Rupe Hintz regression. I know it wasn't as much as Jason Robertson, but back-to-back years of 70-plus points. He drops from 75 to 65 points, playing actually more games than he did the year prior. He played 73 games, had 75 points. He played 80 games this past season, had 65 points. Again, the peripheral stats are still there. He's not a big hitter. He doesn't block too many shots. He shoots the puck pretty well, gets them on net, 182 shots this past year. Again, power play could be a little bit better from what we've seen from Rupe Hintz, but I'm more worried about Rupe Hintz's regression than Jason Robertson's moving forward, because I think Jason Robertson, he's such a playmaker. We know that he's going to be facilitating and setting up his teammates on the power play, 5-on-5 hockey, which he does so well. Rupe Hintz is another question mark just because, has dealt with injuries in the past. He's been pretty durable the last 3 seasons. I will give him that. But there's still so much to love about Rupe Hintz's game. He drives the net hard. He shoots the puck again. He knows how to stick handle in tight and get the puck in the back of the net in various different situations. So again, this is why he falls to number 4 just on this list, because of what I've seen from Wyatt Johnston last year in the playoffs as well. Wyatt Johnston, I'm so impressed with his game. That's why he's above Hintz. But Hintz is still someone to target on your fantasy team in next season.
Hintz is just one of those solid two-way centermen. He can really play both ends of the ice. He kills penalties. We also have seen him perform, and I love bringing up this one, the 2 playoffs ago, when he had a goal at every facet, power play, penalty kill, and 5-on-5. So that right there is actually what he can bring to the table. Sometimes you and I say this a lot, have to separate the impact that Rupe Hintz or a player 100%. Can have on their team on the ice and with a fantasy squad and production. And I think Rupe Hintz, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, might be the most perfect example of that, Steele, because when he's in the lineup, and he proved it when he came back in the playoffs, what was that game? He came back in and RoboCop had a hattie. not only because of how good Jason Robertson is, but because of how good his centerman is in Rupe Hintz. Rupe Hintz, in my opinion, Steele, is not a player that should be slept on overly too much, because I still am very high on this player. Yeah, has there been times where he is one of those players that is just frustrating to own from a fantasy perspective? Yes, but this Dallas Stars team is going to return to being one of the best in the business. Last year, I wanted to bring this up, 113 points, only fell 1 point shy of the President's Trophy. This is one of the best teams in the NHL. Once again, Steele, I would disagree with you on the ranking of the list slightly. I would flip Miro Heiskanen into 4, and I would flip Rupe Hintz into 5, only because defensemen as good as Miro Heiskanen are really hard to acquire in fantasy, and I understand the dip in production, and all of those points that you made are valid. I think Miro Heiskanen, after what I saw from him in the postseason last year, he is only 24, entering his age 25 season, entering his prime. I think you're going to see the best season yet from Miro Heiskanen, so I'm a little bit higher on him, but I'm excited for your take on that. And let's come back from our break, and let's talk about some of the younger maybe players still interesting on this list, because guys like Mason Marchment, 50-point season last year, also a ton of value to be had on this Stars team.
Tons of value on the start team. I do just want to talk about Miro Heiskanen's point right there before we get to break. Miro Heiskanen, the thing that worries me about him, or not worries me, but I would like to see the peripheral stats a lot higher for a guy of this caliber. I would like to see more blocks. I would like to see more physicality. The shots on net.
97 block shots isn't terrible, though.
It's not terrible, but I think when you're a big defenseman like he is, and you see other defensemen in the league, top in the league, it's one of those, it's nitpicking at him. But again, when you speak about superstar caliber defensemen of his quality, I just think you would like to see more physicality. You would like to see him get in front of the puck a little bit more to help out Jake Ottinger. I would like to see some more shots on net. His shots on net dipped from 206 to 162 this past year. Talk about regression as well. He went from 73 points to 54 points. So that's what worries me about him. Again, along to your point with Jason Robertson's regression. I also hope that he bounces back in a big way, and I expect him to bounce back in a big way. But for me, Miro Heiskanen, he makes the 5 on the list, but I wouldn't be mad at number 4 and putting Rupe Hintz number 5.
It's actually kind of interesting. I think it speaks to the quality of this team overall. Down season from 100%. RoboCop, down season from Hintz, a little bit regression from Miro Heiskanen.
Still made it to the Western Conference Finals.
And, that's just how good, big seasons from Mason Marchment, solid seasons from the veterans, getting a whole ton of money, and Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin helped. Tyler Seguin was really good in the postseason as well. And, he finished last season with 25 goals and 27 assists, considering he was also banged up and his injury history. That's 52 points in 68 games. I'm happy with that, and I'm even happier with 60 points with Jamie Benn in 82 games. There are a couple of other names, though, I'd like to talk about here, Steele. And no, it's not Sam Steele, but let's talk about them in a few minutes here. And I'm excited, honestly, to continue to do this. This is a little bit easier on this team. It's quite obvious. You could really, you could slide in a couple of others that are still going to bring a ton of value. We'll talk about them. But other teams that we'll get to, it's going to be intriguing. And I don't think you and I are going to, per se, agree as much as we are on today's show.
We'll end up agreeing to disagreeing on a lot of those lists, but we'll come up with the list together. It'll be a collaboration between us, which we don't do a lot of on this show. So
repeat that list,
we should do more. Repeat the list. We got Jason Robertson, number 1.
Yep.
We got Jake Ottinger, number 2. I had Wyatt Johnston, but I'm not going to disagree with you there because Jake Ottinger will probably be the second Dallas Star off the board in draft. So Jake Ottinger, number 2. We both got Wyatt Johnston, number 3. And then I'll agree to disagree with you again on Miro Heiskanen being number 4.
But we have the same guys at 4 and 5, so it's all the same.
We have the same guys in the top 5 list. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about some potential breakout players, some guys to look out for from this roster as well. I got 2 players in mind. It really just depends on their deployment this upcoming season, but lots to talk about for the Dallas Stars coming up next. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Flip, I'm just going to make this short and sweet because I know you got a couple of players on your mind as well. That
probably
you would like
the same
mention.
guys.
You mentioned Mason Marchment. I don't have him on my list right here, even though he was stellar last year. So I'll save him. I'll let you speak on Mason Marchment coming up in the next season. But for me, these two players are really two guys to look out for in the offensive zone. Number one is Matt Duchene. He signs the 1-year, $3 million deal to return to the Dallas Stars. He has a great season last year, 25 goals, 40 points, 65 points in 80 games, just playing just over 16 and a half minutes of average ice time. And if he continues to play potentially in the top 6 group, get some power play time, I expect Matt Duchene to continue to have success with this Dallas Stars team. As of right now, it does have, again, these are just projection lineups, but as of right now, they do have Logan Stankoven on the second line right wing position alongside Wyatt Johnston, our boy, and Jamie Benn. So if Logan Stankoven is getting deployment on that second line, playing with Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn, Logan Stankoven is going to be a hot commodity as well, because we've already spoke very highly about what Wyatt Johnston brings to the table fantasy aspect wise, what Jamie Benn can do for some of these young prospects, young star players in the lineup for them as well. We saw the connection that they both had once Stankoven came into the lineup as well last season, getting 14 points. 14 points, I believe, in 24. Yeah, 14 points in 24 games for Logan Stankoven. So he has
good in the postseason too.
Good in the postseason. He has the potential to really take off next year if he's in that top 6 deployment. I wanted to mention both Matt Duchene and Logan Stankoven for that reason, because number one, great deal for Matt Duchene to come back on that 1-year, $3 million deal with 65 points that he brings to the table. And the potential of what Logan Stankoven can bring in the offensive zone. Before I pass it over to you, I just want to list off his stats. 24 games, 14 points, 51 shots with 20 hits and 11 blocks. I mean, that's pretty good for a very young player with only 24 games of NHL experience. So he's definitely going to be on my watch list going into next year's draft.
4 or 5 things here to quickly wrap up this episode. We got blinds to be installed. I got a job interview on the go here, Steele, but we're not going to stop with the fantasy takes. Number one, the Dallas power play was 6th best in the NHL last year.
Yes, they were.
So all of these players if you're going to pick some players poised for breakouts, obviously look into all their stats. By the way, Logan Stankoven in 107 games over his last 2 years in the dub, 201 points. This kid is an absolute stallion, and I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. Poised for a breakout in a big way. Dallas also finishes 3rd overall in goal scoring, 294 genos. You know, I also got to talk about Thomas Harley, Steele, because another good young player, only 22 years old, and I checked the birthday. 135 block shots, 18 penalty minutes, 15 goals and 47 points in his first full season in the NHL. If you're not double circling those two names that we just mentioned in Harley and Stankoven, you're slacking in the mackin', because this Dallas Stars team has all the pieces to do it again. And lastly, Mason Marchment, career high in goals and assists, obviously points as well. 108 hits, 150 shots on nets, 54 penalty minutes. In deeper leagues, he is almost draftable. In Keeper Dynasty, he's draftable. But in most formats, he will be that perfect week-to-week ad. Or perhaps if you have a lot of GMs in your league, he's like the last forward you draft and hope that he can replicate 55, maybe 60 points even. But lots of fantasy value to be had with this Dallas Stars team.
This is a very impressive team. Jim Nill has really put together a juggernaut, force to be reckoned with in the Western Conference, and they're going to be a good team for a very, very long time. This is another one of those teams where it's a fantasy gold mine. You've got great goaltenders in Jake Ottinger. You've got great defensemen in Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen, and Esa Lindell, potentially Matt Dumba, and who knows what Ilya Lyubushkin can do, but still a lot to love on the blue line. And there's so much depth scoring. There's so much to love bottom to top in the forward group for the Dallas Stars. So we mentioned all those names: Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger, Thomas Harley, Logan Stankoven, Wyatt Johnston, Mason Marchment. So much to love. Rupe Hintz. Thank you for that. Reminded me of Rupe Hintz, even though he comes in at number 5 on the list. But there's a lot to love. There's a lot of Dallas Stars players going to be taken off the board. I'm so sorry that Joe Pavelski will not be back. I can't talk about Joe Pavelski anymore. He's reached 60 years old in the NHL, Flip.
Happy birthday, Mark.
We won't have to mention his age any longer, but We'll see what happens. I mean, that's it for today's episode. Top
Yes,
5
sir.
best value fantasy players for the Dallas Stars, potential breakout players. We're going to continue this episode. We're going to continue this type of format moving forward with breaking down each and every single team on an episode, just like we did on today's episode. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the follow button, and also go check out Locked On Sports Day's YouTube channel, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also find them on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend out there. Hopefully, we're getting some beautiful weather up here in Canada, in Ontario. Good luck with all your bets this summer, and we shall see you back here again on Sunday.
Peace.